Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we have Albert Collins and we're going all the way back to 1979. This is going to be live at Montreux and he's going to be playing through Snatching It Back. So let's get Albert up on screen and see how he gets on.
This ain't nothing but the blues. Look out! Oh no! Talk to you for a minute.
I'm just going to jump in here because we've got a great flavour of the way that Albert's laying it down in this gig. He's absolutely just getting so involved with the crowd. In the first song that they actually go through, I'm going to put the link to this in the description below so you guys can check it out. He actually walks out into the crowd. He actually sits down in somebody's seat and starts playing because he had such a long lead. He had a special lead made up that was just ridiculously long. And I'm going to get into a couple of stories about that later. But getting into the way that that he's just an absolute showman as well as being a great player, but he's valuing just as much the showmanship as the playing. I've mentioned before about other guitarists that might be great technically gifted guitarists, but they can't connect with an audience because they haven't got that showmanship side. You get some great technical players who are entertainers, and that's what sets them apart. Getting into Albert's playing, we haven't got a great deal of real technical top-end playing because of the nature of the way that Albert actually used to play, and it's because he's using his thumb and his first finger in order to strike the strings. We don't really get to see much of it because he's sitting down on the stage, so the camera angle's not the best angle to see it. You will see it in the other songs from this set, but that first finger, he does use that as a downstroke, but also with an upstroke when he's playing lead. So you'll find that any fast passages that he does throw together are just hammer-ons and pull-offs because he hasn't got the luxury of a pick, being able to alternate pick those runs in order to get a really clear, concise sound and aggressive sound to it. So you'll tend to get that more legato sound. Another thing you'll notice is the capo on the guitar. That's what Albert was known for as well, just literally moving that capo to the key of the song, whichever song that he was playing. Another interesting thing is the way that he tuned his guitar in an F minor chord, I believe, and that's going to totally change the shapes because it's not standard tuning that he's just throwing that capo around. He's actually moving to a minor chord, and it's interesting with this track because I think he's got it up at fret 11. It was a blink and you'll miss it situation at the beginning because I think he was on 12 and then realized that it was a semitone out, quickly moved it down and then got into his lead shapes. And if you don't play guitar, when you do have a capo on your guitar, it means that anything below that is now void. You can't use any of those notes underneath the capo. It's just now all going to be from that capo and above, and that's just the way that Albert played. So from that capo above, he's now just applying his shapes, getting into his blues playing and just applying the shapes that he knows from his F minor chord tuning. And in reference to Albert being just an all-round entertainer and something that will give you an indication of the length of his lead going back to his amp, I want to share a couple of stories. The first one, he actually left the venue at one gig and the crowd followed him, a few members of the crowd, to the store next door where he bought a candy bar and then came all the way back into the venue. All the time he didn't stop playing and the band kept going. And there's another story that he left the venue again, this lead must have been massively long, and he actually came back. Again, he continued playing for all the duration that he was actually out of the venue, and then 10 to 15 minutes later somebody came in with a pizza to give to Albert. So while he was out playing his guitar, he'd been somewhere to order a pizza and then it got delivered. But let's get back into the video.
Snatching it back. Keep on snatching it back. Keep on snatching it back. Keep on snatching it back. The blues, y'all. You feel all right? Let me hear you say yeah. 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 All right. How can we get it down? Keep on snatching it back. Oh, the woman got a problem. Trying to make some blood. How can we get it down, baby? Keep on snatching it back. Oh, you just keep on doing it to me, baby. How can I get it now? standing by. I don't know what's the problem is. Got a big problem. How can I get it now, baby? Keep on snatching it back. How can we get it now, baby? Keep on snatching it back. I don't know what's the matter with you, baby. Yeah. How can I get it now? Keep on snatching it back. I don't know what the problem is. I got to talk to her.
And there we have it. It's one of those gigs and one of those performances that just can go on all night because it's just the blues. You can really just make this last for as long as you want when you're listening to a great band who are great at applying the dynamic changes, but also just with Albert at the front of the stage. He's so entertaining. The way that he talks and sings, obviously that unmistakable vocal when he does hit the pitches, but when he's just talking as well, just telling the story of the song. And Albert has that minimal approach to the blues like so many of the great players had, where it is about that vibrato, that expression, but also putting those lead lines in between the vocals. It means that you're not oversaturated by the sound. And it's like anything when you're talking to somebody, because the guitar's like a voice. When you've got somebody just blabbering on at you all the time, constantly, it just gets boring and, dare I say it, annoying. Whereas the guitar, being a voice, means that if you've got somebody who's just talking to you in bite-sized chunks, it's going to make it so much easier to latch onto, and it's going to make it more interesting. So every line that comes out of Albert's guitar is more interesting because there's less of it. When you just hit with so many notes every second, at some points it'll get to a point where you just almost zone out because your brain is too much information to take in. And these great blues players were so interesting to listen to because everything they said through their guitar was so interesting, and it just absolutely engaged you all the time with everything that they're playing because it was never too much. And Albert was one of those players that didn't start at a really young age. I think it was about 12 when he started concentrating on guitar. He did have piano lessons when he was 9, and when his tutor was unavailable for those lessons, his cousin would teach him guitar. And that's how he actually learnt the tuning, because his cousin just showed him that F minor tuning, tuned it up like that, and with the capo as well. So that's how Albert started to learn and never changed that throughout his career. And at age 18, he started his first band called the Rhythm Rockers, and for the first 2 years of that, he used to play an Epiphone guitar, but then he saw Clarence Gatemouth Brown, who you can find on this channel, so check him out if you get a chance. He saw Clarence playing a Fender Esquire, so Albert then decided to buy a Fender, and since Albert was then known as the master of the Telecaster throughout his career, and we can see him using a Telecaster in this video in particular. And by age 22, Albert still hadn't released anything with the Rhythm Rockers, and they were joined by a 17-year-old Johnny Copeland at the time, and over the next 17 years, Albert did release 5 albums, and that wasn't as part of that band. It's very much his own name that was featured on those albums. But the one thing that he didn't do over those next 17 years was music full time. He was still working because he wasn't making enough money from music in order to quit any jobs. And the kind of jobs that he did, he was a truck driver, he also mixed paint, and an interesting one was that he worked in construction, and he worked on a remodel modelling for Neil Diamond, and I think that was in 1971. So in the early 70s, he was doing that construction work and doing music on the side, and it wasn't until the late 70s that his wife actually convinced him to then do music full time. And this was when Albert was 46, so he wasn't a young guy here, but you can tell in his playing that he has that lifetime of experience. It's such an authentic blues that he lays down because he's played all those pubs and clubs and all the bars and has absolutely honed his craft. And in 1985, he performed at Live Aid with George Thorogood and the Destroyers, and I'm sure you're aware that that was watched by over 1.5 billion people worldwide. The year after that, he won a Grammy for a collaboration album, and the year after that, he was on NBC's talk show, which was called Late Night with David Letterman, and 4 years after that, at the age of 59, he signed a record deal with Virgin Records, and that was through the subsidiary label which was called Point Blank Records. But he wasn't a young guy, you know, he's pushing 60 here and signing a new record deal. And in late 1991, he played a show for Austin City Limits, and that was recorded on DVD, and that was released, I think, early the next year, 1992. And in July of 1993, Albert was playing in Switzerland and was taken ill. And I'm sure you guys know the story that unfortunately he was diagnosed with cancer, and it was lung cancer that had actually spread to the liver as well. So he was only given 4 months to live. So 2 months after that, he was still playing live shows, and that September, the shows that he was playing was then turned into his last ever album, which was called Live 92/93, and 2 months after that, in November of 1993, at age 61, he unfortunately passed away. But what a legend of the blues, and it's one of those stories that he didn't have that life of just doing music all the time and having record deal after record deal that was just big money. He really did have to work, and I think having that experience, that life experience of just absolutely working your fingers to the bone just to make ends meet really does give him such great expression, so much to put into that blues. Like I mentioned before, such authentic blues from Albert. Absolutely nothing contrived about the way that he plays and the way that he entertains as well, just a natural born entertainer. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!